Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art and culture, and today we're finally going to be covering the newest album from Kamelot, titled Haven. You know, back when I was getting into metal in high school, I remember having a conversation with another student who's about a year or two older than me who was also really into metal. I mean, I told him I was listening to a bunch of power metal and symphonic metal. I remember him just kind of snickering and laughing at me and saying like, what, like Kamelot? Those guys are so lame. Now this time I was only getting into the genre and I hadn't heard of Wikipedia yet, so I'd never heard of this band, so I went home and picked up what few tracks I could find online, most of which were off the band's 2003 album, Epica. I remember thinking that there are a couple songs that are good here, but the band just didn't impress me in the same way that Nightwish or Blind Guardian or Within Temptation ever did. I mean, sure, the songs weren't bad, but they didn't seem all that special to me. And just like my abortive attempt to get into the band Epica around that time, I put aside Kamelot for, well, nearly a decade. So fast forward to, well, nowadays, I started getting requests whether or not I'd cover the newest album from Kamelot titled Haven. At this point, I was in the mood to hear some good power metal, and I figured the band deserved a more complete and more fair reevaluation than I gave them the first time. So I began working my way through their extensive discography and their almost dozen albums of material across lineup changes, a number of them, and nearly 20 years of existence. To me, the band started hitting more of their mark with their second album, Dominion, with the much tighter and cohesive tracks than their debut, Eternity, which featured great guitar work from their one consistent member across their history, Thomas Youngblood, but definitely needed work in putting together cohesive songs, instrumentally and lyrically. But it wouldn't be until the replacement of their drummer, and then followed by the replacement for their lead vocalist with longtime powerhouse Roy Khan, that things would materialize even more, with the next two albums giving them a chance to get more of their bearings before the absolutely stellar 1-2-3 punch that was Karma in 2001, Epica in 2003, and the Black Halo in 2005. Let's make this clear. If I'm looking for albums to win any metal fan over on Kamelot, it'd be those, because they are goddamn awesome. But after that, Kamelot went in a more aggressively heavy direction with their next two albums, almost following some of the trends at the time. Unfortunately, to diminishing returns though, with their 2010 release Poetry for the Poison probably being the weakest that they had in over a decade. But that wasn't the only problem, as singer Roy Khan left the band due to burnout, something that this critic can kind of believe given how some of his vocals sounded on Poetry for the Poison. Now he was replaced by Tommy Kavarik for their 2012 album and their third concept record, Silverthorn, which actually turned out to be a pretty damn solid return to form, even if it wasn't quite at their best. So, extremely late to the punch me covering this, I decided to dig into their follow-up record, Haven. Does it measure up? Well, I'm honestly a little bit torn about this album. I'll be honest, I've been sitting with this record a lot longer than I do with most, listening through it over and over again, which only delayed this review over and over again. But while I definitely think this is a strong album, I don't quite love it as much as I wanted to, and that's part of the problem. Don't get me wrong, there's some absolutely stellar songs on it, a few that might even have a shot at being some of my favorites of 2015, no jokes there. But as a whole, it feels a little bit hit and miss across the board, lacking the driving narrative of their best records and straying into melodrama more often than I'd like to see in symphonic metal. In other words, it's definitely good, but it's not great. Sitting comfortably in the middle tier of releases from Kamelot and falling to the category of great metal acts that I really like, not quite living up to the high standards they set for themselves in 2015. So okay, what happened here? Well, let's start with the instrumentation and production, and I'll give Kamelot this. It's been a while since I've heard the band deliver such a lush, symphonic, sonically diverse, and dare I say it, pop-friendly album. I always thought it's been one of Kamelot's unsung strengths that they can write phenomenally strong melodic hooks, which is why their more groove-heavy mid to late 2000s material tended to drag in with me, not be quite as good. It does take a little bit while to get going for the record. Fallen Stars, not the greatest song, the minor key-driven Insomnia with the spiky film of static over the guitars, and the Lacuna Coil-esque opening keys on Citizen Zero don't exactly win me over as some of their best, even though the punishing groove and symphonic interlude on Citizen Zero has a ton of force. But then when Veil of Elysium kicks in, with that key change for the solo, they got a bona fide smash. Great song. The odd thing is that the grooves, they tend to get thicker and meatier as the song continues, with the percussion almost growing industrial like on a beautiful Apocalypse, and especially on Revolution, to the point where the grooves become so dense and frenetic that doesn't always give the melodies the same room to breathe, no matter how much the overworked guitar and strings try to give the melodies prominence. Of course there are some exceptions to this, like the delicate symphonic ballad Here's to the Fall, where the odd sort of key progression doesn't really land as well as I'd like it to, as well as the Delaney's track My Therapy, with that sparkling keyboard line that runs through the entire song, very much like Delane, and on that note, not quite one of their best. Hell, they even recruit Delane frontwoman Charlotte Wessels for the duet Under Grey Skies, with Nightwish bagpipes player Troy Donockley on the tin whistle. And yeah, no dancing around this, Under Grey Skies is the best power ballad that I've heard in months from any genre, if not years. Both singers, they sell the hell out of it, they've got great chemistry, the orchestral backdrop is absolutely beautiful, it sounds sounds fantastic, and the melodic focus lends the song an epic swell. I honestly wish more of this record could have gone in this direction. A little bit more frustrating when you have a guest star like Elisa Van Gloos. Yeah, her clean vocals are fantastic on Liar Liar, Wasteland, Monarchy, but her growling vocals? Ugh, look, I appreciate the effort, but it doesn't nearly feel as raw or visceral as it should. And with all the effects that are piled on her voice on Revolution, it feels like an attempt to force more power and visceral appeal than through production rather than through delivery. Now, granted, I take issue with a lot of the vocal effects piled onto Tommy Kavarik's voice as well. Well, it's because he's a damn expressive vocalist, he doesn't need them. They just kind of feel a little tacky to me. The one area where I'm a little bit underwhelmed by Kavarik as a vocalist is in some of his falsetto, especially on Fallen Star, but let's be honest, he doesn't use it very often. I'm mostly okay with it. Now, this takes us to lyrics and themes. Now, unlike their last record, Haven doesn't exactly have an underlying narrative, and I'll be blunt and say that does work a bit against them, given how strong some of their narratives can be in amplifying their lyrical elements. But that doesn't mean there isn't a dramatic arc to the sorts of this album, in this case exploring how one learns to draw focus and strength of character from within, instead of from a world of projected fake smiles and Facebook statuses. Unsurprisingly for any power metal band, though, Kamelot tends to stick with more abstract broad strokes. They don't call out anything by name, but instead capturing the chill of being forgotten on Fallen Star later as reprised of acceptance of doing what will be remembered, but doing it for oneself, that has real powerful to it in thematic straits. And those are all the songs I don't even really like. Where this album gains a lot of lyrical heft and power for me is the idealism and romanticism of tracks like Veil of Elysium, Under Grey Skies, and especially End of Innocence, as they call back to simpler optimism and hoping for better times, which Kamelot, they just play beautifully. It's a great fit for them. And I even dug into the nuance on Liar Liar, Wasteland, Monarchy, tearing into religion that offers contradictory standards of salvation and damnation in the same hand, and yet still provides the security that our frontman can crave. Even though he knows it's not gonna give him what he wants, there's still some pull to it. Where I feel this album slips up a little bit is where it can tip towards melodrama, with My Therapy being the prime example. Maybe it's just me, but it always makes me feel a little bit uneasy when people describe their lovers as being therapeutic. It just feels a little bit creepy, and even if that creepiness was intentional, it didn't quite resonate as well as it could have. Citizen Zero, another case here, where it seems like Kavarik is taking on the persona of original sin itself, a sentiment later echoed on Revolution and End of Innocence, so okay, I give them for thematic consistency, but combined with other self-flagellating tracks, it can feel kind of overwrought. And yeah, I get the intention to highlight the shift between insecurity, which can be overwrought, and finding acceptance within oneself, but the concepts feel like they demand a little bit more subtlety than the instrumentation and the lyrics really give them. It just feels played a little bit too broad, if that makes any sense. So yeah, to conclude, this is a record that has some incredible highs, but not quite enough of them to elevate into being one of Kamelot's best. Let's be honest, they've got an upper tier of records that's pretty hard to crack into with Karma, Epica, and the Black Halo. And while Haven does have a few songs that would fit into that category, it feels a little bit thin and loosely sketched, especially with the inclusion of peripheral instrumental interludes that don't really add a lot, especially the title track, which is an instrumental fade out that doesn't really do much for me. So yeah, for me, solid 7 out of 10, definitely recommended for a couple of the best songs they've had, and as a potent metal record, but I get the feeling it could have been better. And hell, even if you're not a metal fan, give Kamelot a listen anyway. They're definitely worth it, and you don't want to be this late, like me, catching up on them. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. You'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yeah, I know it's a very long time me getting to this record, but I wanted to cover them before I do my mid-year review, which is coming up in a couple days, so stay tuned for that. But if there's anything else coming up that you want me to take a look at, I'm more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, I'll see you next time.